Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our summer release webinar. This afternoon, we're going to be looking at our summer release, which incorporates versions 8.33 to 8.35 of Compucare. You can see 8.35 released around the middle of July. So this afternoon, I'm joined by a couple of colleagues. I've got Ben Heaver, who's going to be joining us on the Q&A. So as we go through the webinar today, if you've got any questions around the things that you're seeing, please put them into the Q&A panel within the Teams event, and Ben will try and answer those for you. I've also got Mark with me today as well, who'll be helping to present lots of the enhancements that we've got to show you. So on the screen, you can see at the moment, we've got a few of the sort of high-level areas that we're going to go through, but I would say there's quite a number of enhancements that we'll be showing you today because we're covering those three releases that we just went through. So we'll start out. I will go through some slides. I'll then go on to presenting my system and those enhancements. We'll have a little break and then we'll come back and Mark will round off the event with the last of the enhancements that we're going to go through. So let's just have a look at the first side. So we're just going to go through some general improvements that we've made. And so the first thing we wanted to talk about was a couple of new apps that we have called export settings. And this has really been put into the system to help our projects team mainly when we're working with you with regards to rolling out new functionality, new screens, or particularly when we're upgrading clients from one version of Compucare to another. So quite often what we'll do is we'll provision a testing environment for you. We'll do all of the config within that environment, and then actually we need to push that config live once it's all been signed off. So that was quite difficult previously, and we used to have scripts to migrate certain settings from one database to another. Now we've got a couple of apps that will facilitate that. So you can see from the screenshots that we have there that it covers users and security roles, it covers screen layouts, it covers filters that you might have set up to push out across various apps in the system. So it's just really, we wanted to highlight that that facility exists. We don't think it's something you'll use a lot, but obviously if you do want to use it, you just need to get in touch with us and we can help you migrate items from one database to another. For the moment, we've just made this available to the Streets Heaver user only, and that's really because we wanted to keep some level of control in terms of not allowing people to accidentally import settings to the wrong database and things like that, which is why we've opted that it, at this moment, will help with those times when that's needed. So looking at the next feature that we wanted to go through, we just wanted to have a chat about a change that we'd made to menus within the system. So this is something that your users are likely to see across the outpatients booking app or the inpatients booking app, as I've picked this one from here. And you can see from the screenshot that's there, this menu has a scroll bar on the right-hand side and it become quite big. We were always getting requests to say, can you just add this as another right-click option when you're right-clicking an inpatient booking in this case? And so what we've done is we've tried to look at tidying those menus up. So you can see we've shrunk it down, and then all of the edit options are under edit, all of the add options are under add, and things like that, just to really fit the menu to the screen and make it a bit more logical for the users navigating. But that is a change that they're all going to see once you apply version 8.35. So just moving on, next one that we wanted to go through, just a little change again. This is a screen grab of the current theatre tracking screen, and you can see it's currently displaying the patient photograph, it's displaying the patient's date of birth and their address and things like that. The feedback that we got was that people wanted the same patient details slider that we have elsewhere in the application, just to try and tidy up the theatre lists for the different theatres that will have this open tracking their patients through. So again, you can see just from the little signal bars, as I click on those, the level of detail goes down, loses the address if you don't need it on screen, and likewise loses the picture if you're not using those as well. So it's just a little change that the users can do to their setup to try and streamline the data that they're looking at. So moving on to the next slide, we wanted to have a quick look at our Clinicians app. So this is a website that we provide, a number of you are using for consultants and their medical secretaries to be able to see the diaries that are set up in Compucare for the consultant and to be able to make remote bookings into those diaries. So one of the things that has happened over the last year or two is that more consultants are logging into main Compucare to request tests and exams electronically, and we needed a way when they're away from the hospital to be able to show them the results and reports as they come back in for their patients and the exams that they've requested. So there's a new button within the Clinicians app. You can see it highlighted there in the left panel, and this will now show all of the tests that have been ordered for that consultant's patients and let them drill in and start looking at results, just like they would see the results in main Compucare. So this is one part of a change that we've made, and we just wanted to say that, you know, if people upgrade their Clinicians app, this is something that's then available to them to start looking at. But later on in the demonstration, what I'll do is I'll go through the opposite side of this, where we've built some new notification functions to actually alert the clinician to the fact that there are results to log in and have a look at. So we'll just move on from this one. So the next thing that I wanted to briefly touch on was eDischarge. So we've looked at this in a previous webinar, and we also had a webinar a couple of weeks ago where we went through the function in some detail. And so what this was really we have now had our NHS digital sign-off for our eDischarge summary feature that we've previously presented. So just to recap what that was, we currently have to produce an eDischarge summary when a patient is discharged from the hospital. We follow the Patient Record Standards Bureau guidelines on what that eDischarge should contain, all the relevant fields. We've built into Compucare an ability to look up against the patient, their GP and practice, and from that we can then look at the NHS digital mesh framework, look up the mailbox at that GP practice to send back to, and send that discharge summary off electronically. So there was a really good YouTube video that my colleague Stefan has recorded as part of a webinar that we did the other week. So that would be worth going and having a look at around this. But really all we were highlighting was, as of 8:35, that's now officially been signed off by the NHS and can start to be deployed out at your hospitals if that's an area of interest for you. So just moving on, because we didn't want to spend too long in PowerPoint, what I'll do is I'll just bring up Compucare and we'll start to go through some of the enhancements. So here we are at my login screen, and what I'm going to do is just click login. This is going to take me to my home screen, and we're going to start to go through some of the new changes. So the first area I want to start with is debit and credit card payments. So a number of you are currently using our debit and credit card interface with PXP Financials. And one of the things that can happen occasionally is that the Compucare system, when it's launching a payment to be taken, can lose connectivity with, or can in some cases not receive back a message from the PXP solution telling it that the payment has gone through successfully. The end result of this is that you can occasionally see payments in the merchant bank account and payments on the PXP portal that don't actually exist in Compucare. And when you've got those random payments of £95 for a GP appointment or whatever it might have been, it can be quite difficult to take something that's in the bank and try and work out which patient did this belong to. Now, thankfully, this doesn't happen very often, but what we've done is we've added a couple of extra features into here to try and help when that might happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Add Patient Payment, and I'm going to go and search for my patient, Stephanie Grantham, and we'll just find Stephanie on the list. And I'm going to go and look as if I was taking a payment. So we'll say it's a self-pay payment. We'll say that she's paying by credit card, and we'll say that she's paying £250. And so what would then happen is I would go through, I would hit save, and if I was going to take that payment from Stephanie over the phone, I would pick my keyed transaction, I would pick my card device, so this one's my main reception card reader, and I would pick my bank account, which could be any merchant. In this case, it's Elevon for me. So what would then happen is I was hit save, And the user operating Compucare would be talking to the patient, getting the patient's long digits from their card. They would be getting the expiry date. They would be getting the security code. And occasionally you might find that you didn't get a successful message back, but the payment might actually have gone through. So I'm just going to cancel out of this for a second. I'm just going to drill into Stephanie's account, and we'll pretend that the system has not received that success message. And so when I drill into Stephanie's account and have a look at her transactions app, within here, there's a new filter down the bottom called provisional. We've created for receipts a new status, which is provisional, almost like an unposted status, like an unposted invoice. And so this is where, against a patient for an £105 payment that I tried to take the other day and deliberately crashed the system to stop it going through, it's held this here saying, look, I'm not sure if this payment has gone through successfully or not. So it gives you that opportunity to kind of understand that there might have been £105 that's hit the account. And if it has, we can reconcile it when we do the bank rec, and we can press post, and then that can be allocated off against a future invoice and things like that. If after a few days we haven't received that, we can hit delete and get rid of that transaction, but at least we have the record of the date and time that the transaction was initiated, the amount, the patient, so that we can start to try and tie things together. And likewise, if I just go back to my home screen and look at my patient transactions app, and you'll see that the same provisional filter exists down the bottom. At the moment, I've just got that one from Stephanie, because fortunately this is something that happens quite rarely. But if you wanted to pin that back to your home screen as a pin tile, you could get there, and then it could start to alert you if there was a transaction to go and look at that Compucare wasn't sure about. So just a little change, but we just wanted to highlight that we've made that to try and help when those occasional reconciliation issues come up. So sticking with the debit and credit card payments, one of the things that we've done recently is we've integrated with PXP's checkout solution. And this is of real benefit to the hospitals, because what you're not going to need to do is have chip and pin devices in your back office areas. It's going to mean that you can use Compucare to take the payment. It can all be done securely through PXP's payment portal, and you can get the payment recorded into Compucare, but you're not going to have to get lots of those Verifone devices for your finance department or your patient sales team. And so less cost on hardware, less cost on support and maintenance of those products and things like that. So again, I'm just going to go to my add patient payment screen, and I'm going to continue with that £250 credit card payment that we were going for. I'm going to hit save, and this time I'm going to, instead of saying I want my keyed device, you'll see here I have a new option called AnyPay Checkout. And so if I click on that, I'll just say it's Elavon again for my merchant, and I'll click on Checkout. And that's just going to take a second to load up the PXP financial iframe. So then all the communication is, whilst it's showing like it's in Compucare, it's actually happening all securely within the PXP iframe back to PXP's service in order to take that payment securely. So you can see you would have the patient at the end of the phone. We're trying to take that £250 amount from Stephanie. We'd be entering her cardholder name, her number, expiry date, security code, etc., so that you haven't got to watch me type all of that out. All I'm going to do is click on the card that I've used previously, and as that goes through, the only thing I've got to do now is ask Stephanie for her security digits off the back, which I'll just go and enter. So once I've done that, I can take the payment, and that'll just spin around for a couple of seconds, and then it will come back, payment successful. So payments all good and gone through. We'll close the window, and then it'll drop us back to the normal Compucare screen that we're used to. So I can now print Stephanie a copy of her receipt and pop it in the post, or more likely send her an email with that on. And that payment's now committed into Stephanie's account. So again, if I was to go to my transactions app for Stephanie and look at my posted balances, I would now see a receipt there from today for £250 that's successfully gone through the debit and credit card interface. So just a couple of changes on the PXP and Compucare side, but we just wanted to show you that we'd made those. So the next area that I'm going to go on to is to do with clinical coding. So I'll just come back to the home screen, and I'll go into outpatient bookings for the moment. So I've got a list of bookings that are currently sat at a status of awaiting clinical coding. This same filtering exists on the inpatient side as well. So the functions I'll show you in here will work there the same way. But effectively, when you're coding records for FIN compliance, or whether you're coding them for NHS work that you've done, where you need to make sure that you've got the clinically coded procedures and clinically coded diagnosis in against the patient's appointment, there wasn't previously a way to flag that you were done with the coding. It was kind of a status of it, assumed that you were, but if you were still actually partway through having done a patient's coding and you needed to come back and add some more detail to it later on, there wasn't really that interim status. So if I go to my patient on the list here, Sean Knight, and what I'll do is I'll select the clinically code button at the top, and you can see in this screen that I've currently got a procedure in here to say that I've done an injection, but I haven't actually said what I've done that injection for. And so if I had come in here and sort of this was blank, I could be entering that procedure because I know what's done there, but actually I've got to go and look in the medical record file a bit more to see what was wrong with the patient. I can use this new toggle, which is all we're talking about here, which is the clinical coding complete or not? Yes, no. If it's no, I can save that and come back into it, and Sean Knight will still be flagging as needing coding. If it's yes, then the coding's complete. And just to finish things off, I will put in a clinical code for a problem. So we'll have some sort of problem with the knee. And as I go through and hit save on that, that's just then going to drop Sean off the list because I was just looking at people who required clinical coding, yes, no, but it just gives you that interim status now. So moving on to the next piece that I wanted to have a look at, it was really to do with billing and invoicing. So we have had a problem described to us for those customers that are using EDI to send batches of invoices electronically to the insurers, where there are occasions where the insurance companies are coming back and querying the invoices, and this scenario seems to be around where the invoice from the hospital is a combined invoice containing the hospital's fee for a procedure, the surgeon's fee, and also the anaesthetist's fee. In the file that the Healthcode system generates to send over to the insurers from the data that we've provided to it, there is a field called controlling specialist, and that field is generally populated with the surgeon. So in my case, Dr. Jones, who's done that hip replacement or knee replacement. But actually, we're finding that the insurers are querying the anaesthetist fee quite a lot, and actually needing to say, well, who was this? Now, the EDI files don't really allow us to do that because you can only have one controlling specialist per claim. So how we've had to deal with this problem for those customers where this has arisen is we've had to have a look at how we can split an invoice to effectively send off to Bupa or AXA or whoever it might be, the hospital fee and the surgeon's fee, but then separately send the anaesthetist fee. So I'm going to show you how some of this works, and then we can talk about whether it's relevant to you as a customer or not, and then we can move on to another item. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick on Bupa and go and have a look at my contract. So under my purchases, I have Bupa, and I can drill in and have a look at my contracts for Bupa, of which I've got quite a few old expired ones. But here's the one I want at the bottom, my 2021 contract. And if I go and edit that contract, what we've effectively done is made use of one of the rules that existed on the contract, which was the bill to separate invoice rule. And so I've already added it on here. So what I'm going to do is just drill into that. So I've given it a name, and I've said this separate invoice rule actually is applying to just anaesthetist fees. I've said when I generate this second invoice for this one admission that I still want it to go to Bupa. It's not going off to the patient separately or anything like that. And I've also said in the billing group that this only applies to my billing group of anaesthetist fees. So that's one part of the implementation of the change that we've done here to allow you to configure this if it is a problem for you. So the other side of things, if I just go back to my home screen and go to my charge master, is we have against anaesthetist fees, which if I just search for anaesthetist, against we'll pick my into 2 fee. against a charge item where we've got what's the name of it and how much does it cost down the bottom and what billing group is it in, so anaesthetist fees, just like we saw on the contract. We've now got this system category field, and here this allows us to say whether or not the item is an anaesthetist fee item, and this is so that the code that we use to generate the EDI submission for those batches of invoices can explicitly identify this as being an EDI submission for an anaesthetist fee, and therefore pick the anaesthetist, not the surgeon, to put on the output. So just to kind of show how all that hooks together, I've got a patient that I've already put through. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to search for a new patient. I'm going to search for Alice Dawson. We'll just pick Alice, and what we'll then do is we will go on to her recent bookings. We'll have a look at her to be billed bookings. I'll just clear all the filters on that and select all status. That's okay. Just to use the dates of this year, that should get it up. So we've got an admission there. So we can see here that this was discharged. I've already billed it, and Alice was in for a total knee replacement costing £10,000 roughly. She's with Bupa on that inpatient contract that we looked at, and I have generated some charges based on this actual procedure that's been recorded. So those have automatically been added to the charges screen, and then when I've come to produce the invoices, I've ended up with two invoices. I've ended up with one of £500, which if I go and print that to screen, just let that come around, just expand it, you can see is just the anaesthetist fee, which is that splitting of this out to a separate invoice. And I've ended up with this one, which is quite expensive because there was a lot of accommodation charge had been generated with this, but had the surgeon's fee and the hospital fee for the procedure, so the major plus fee in this case. So you end up with two invoices for one admission, which is what all of those things are doing together. And then if I look at my EDI app and my submissions, I've already generated an EDI batch, which you would normally just do from the top here for Bupa in this case. And when I drill into here to view the claims, you can see that we've got those two invoices for Alice Dawson listed in here at the various amounts. So the missing piece of the puzzle with all of this is when I've sorted any problems out with the claim of this batch of invoices, I can then press that send button, and that pressing of send is where the system will then do its calculation for the files that it outputs for you to upload to the Healthcode EDI portal for whether the controlling specialist on that invoice wants to be the surgeon or the anaesthetist. So this is all quite a lot to get your head around. It is quite complicated. I think what I would say is if you're not having a problem where insurance companies are continuously querying it, you don't need to do anything with this. There's no change to be made. If you're finding that they're constantly coming back to you saying, we're not paying this because you haven't told us who the anaesthetist is, then there's some configuration that we can help you with the system to allow things to go through in the manner that the insurance companies are expecting. So I'm not going to actually show that file being generated. We'll leave it there, but it was just to tell you that that exists. Okay, so the next change that I just quickly wanted to touch on whilst we're looking at inpatients is around cancelled bookings. So I'll just drill into my inpatient app on here, and I've already got a filter set up for cancelled bookings, and I've got some bookings that I've cancelled previously. So the change that we've made here is that we previously, when a booking was cancelled, so Luke Johnson coming in this week for 3 nights, I'd previously planned him to be in bed 102 on Ward 1, just out of my make-believe hospital here. So what would happen when we cancelled this booking is we'd actually delete the bed plan altogether. So you would lose any concept of the fact that Luke was due into bed 2. This was a problem for those sites that have got Compucare linked up to other inpatient systems, so potentially other systems for monitoring the patient in the actual rooms, like room 102 here. So in order that the cancellation messages go out to downstream systems correctly, we've corrected this so it retains that bed plan in in a cancelled way, and means that we're passing the downstream systems the right information. The only other change that might come up with this is if you tried to revert this booking, for some reason Luke can now make the appointment again, or it was cancelled by mistake, it will check and make sure the bed's available. And so previously you would have been able to just revert it, but you would have had to have gone back onto it and added a bed. This time around, if the bed's free, it's going to say, well, you tried to put him in bed 2 last time, let's put him in bed 2 again. Otherwise, if bed 2 isn't available, it's going to come up with a message. If I just try and revert this, you'll see it briefly, but it's as far as I'll take it. It's going to say, you know what, it's not available anymore, but do you want to go and edit the booking and put a different bed on it? So this orange validation message is something your users might occasionally see, and we are now passing more bed information in our messages, but there's probably no more to show on this. So the other piece I just wanted to touch on, and it kind of relates to waiting lists, is when you cancelled a booking previously, so you can see I've got Colin Jackson who was due in for a few nights. He was due in for a total hip replacement, and when I cancelled this booking, it potentially would have added Colin back to an inpatient booking required waiting list or something like that, and it wasn't bringing the procedure through with it. So admin users were having to look back at the outpatient appointment, see what procedure the clinician had requested for that patient, and then go and enter it in again when they went to, rebook that appointment, which obviously was not ideal, because it was double keying information the system should have already had, and obviously left a risk perhaps of the wrong procedure being selected if they didn't have their eye on the ball and things like that. So just a little change that, we've cancelled that booking. It was for a total hip, and if I was to go and find Colin on the waiting lists under my inpatient booking required, I would then see that, he's there and waiting for that hip replacement. So just a nice little easy change to tie things up, but you'll start seeing that happen. So the next thing I wanted to have a look at on waiting lists was around a new categorization that we have on waiting list entries. So I'm going to go to my referrals received list, and I've got lots of patients on here because I never remember to rebook them, but we've got a new field on here called category. So we're now able to add our own categories to waiting list entries in order that we can group and sort and filter the waiting list screen by this data. So you'll see that I've got Tony Zammit that I'm highlighting here. We have a priority 1 urgent case. I've got Luca here that's a priority 2 high. I've got Linda who's normal. So just to show you where this exists, what I'll do is I'll just come out of the waiting list screen. I'll type in category, and we'll just have a look down the bottom. There is an entirely new code table called waiting list categories, and these are ones that I've set up myself, so you can call them what you like. You don't have to mirror this. And if I just go and edit one of them, you can see the only thing it's got is what is it called. So it's quite simple to go and set these up. So once you've done that, if I just go back to my waiting lists and go back into my referrals received, when I edit a waiting list entry, I'm then able to set that. So the only other things we've done is make that available as a column so that you can see it and sort by it, and also to allow you to group by that same data. So if I wanted to flip that around and say, show me all my, how many are at normal status, how many are at high, and how many haven't yet been classified and things like that, I can do that quite easily. So just a little change, but again, should hopefully allow you to make sure you're seeing the urgent priority patients first and getting those off the waiting list. So just while we're in waiting list, there's a couple of other little changes that we've made. So one is to be able to filter by specialty and treatment function. So you can see that we have specialty and treatment function available as fields against a waiting list entry. And over on the left-hand side, when I bring the filter panel out, you can see that when I go to show more filters, I've now got the ability to say, well, actually just show me anyone who's waiting on cardiology and things like that. So I can then narrow my list right down. Likewise, if I wasn't wanting to filter by that and I wanted to sort the waiting list by it, we've also added in my column chooser, I can go down the bottom, I can pick treatment function, I can find wherever specialty is hiding, there we go. I can add those on as columns. We'll just shrink that filter panel down so you can see it. And then if I wanted to sort by that, or again, drag it up as a way of grouping my list together, I could then see, all the patients that are waiting under different specialties. So if you've got certain teams of people who are only booking certain categories of patients, this is just another way to try and help them with those lists that they're going through. So the other piece that I wanted to have a look at whilst we're in the waiting list app is another little change that we've made around something called originating booking. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my specialty sort off here, and I'm just going to flip this around back to my most recent referral date, and we'll find Tony again that we looked at before with that urgent priority case, and we'll just go on to the inpatient booking required list. So the problem that we've tried to address here is that when a patient comes and sees a consultant in outpatients and obviously has the consultation, has any diagnostics, sees that consultant again, it wasn't always clear when that patient ended up on a waiting list which appointment had actually put them on there. So if the admin team's trying to find out more information about why is this being requested, what's the details that I might need around this booking, they would normally bring up the patient timeline at the side, but it wasn't clear which one of the 3, 4, 5 appointments might have actually spurred this into the inpatient booking required waiting list. So we've just added this section for originating booking, so it now shows you that this was the appointment on the 4th of June at 11 o'clock that's put this here. And likewise, if I went off and booked Tony in for an admission, a surgical booking or an inpatient booking, you would get an associated booking that would populate here to tell you what it was linked to. So just another little change just to try and help the admin teams, find the information and where the information sits within the overall patient record. So just while we're looking at waiting lists, the only other little change that we've made is about adding a patient to multiple waiting lists, which is something that some of the clients had asked us to have a look at. So I'm just going to close some of these apps I was dealing with just so we can tidy things up. And so really the scenario that I just want to go through is a patient has been to see a consultant. The consultant's decided that they need to go onto that inpatient booking required waiting list and has decided that they want to have a total hip replacement or knee replacement or whatever it might be. It might be that that patient also needs to go onto other waiting lists at the same time. So maybe they need to go onto a waiting list to have their preoperative assessment booked, or maybe they need to go onto a waiting list to also make sure that the pre-op physio, if such is needed, is booked. So what we've done is we've done this with our forms. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to search for my forms and click onto it, which these are then used in the consultation by the consultant when they're filling out what they need. I've got a form called assessment, and if I just give that a double click and go on to it, I've got what my form's called, and I've got all the various questions that appear as part of that form. So what's the problem with the patient? What are we planning to do about it? And I've got a new question that I've added on here called pre-op physio required. And if I just drill into that, just because it's easier to do it all from here, what we've done is we've now got a new result type of waiting list. So previously, when you're setting these up, you could pick free text or yes, no tick box or date field or numeric field and things like that. There's just a new value in the drop down called waiting list. And then you can say what waiting list would it add this patient to if it was ticked. So just to kind of show you that in full action, what we'll do is we'll just come out of the form setup and we'll drill into Dr. Jones. So I've got a couple of patients due in to see Dr. Jones today. So we'll just go into Dr. Jones. We'll go to the clinicians view as if we were logged in as Dr. Jones. And you'll see I've got Stephanie and Jessica on the list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with Stephanie because we used her before. I'm going to press play on the appointment and it's going to take me in. And so what it's going to do is load up that assessment form that I was just looking at. So what's the problem that Stephanie's here for today? What's her medical history and things like that. And as I go through, we'll just say saw hip and mobility issues. Just to get around the mandatory fields, I could say, what she's told me she's diabetic. I could have filled out all this other information around known allergies and current medications. I've just got to fill out a couple of other fields here to do with height and weight and things like that. And you'll see I've got that question, is pre-op physio required, yes or no? And if I tick yes to that, I can tick it and say, yes, I do want that. And as part of this, I can then outcome that appointment. And so that outcome might be also that I want an inpatient booking. So that inpatient booking is then going to come up and say, okay, for the waiting list for that, what's the procedure that you want? So let's just quickly add a procedure. We'll stick with something like a hip replacement. We'll put in whether it's left or right or bilateral and things like that. Any notes that we want, any other notes that we want. And then assuming I've filled in all the mandatory fields, what I can do is I can just hit save on that. It's going to go through, check everything's okay. And then I can press finish, and that'll drop me back to my list, and I can then pick up the next patient. So what that's done again behind the scenes is it's added Stephanie to a couple of different waiting lists. So if I click onto Stephanie just to drill into her record, we'll just get rid of that transaction screen that we were in before. And I'm just going to have a look at waiting list entries. So I'll just type in waiting lists. We'll click onto waiting lists, and then I can see now that I've got Stephanie on a from today's date for a physiotherapy required entry that the bookings team would be able to go through and action. But I've also got her on the inpatient booking required list from today's date as well for that hip replacement that we've asked for. So again, there's no limit to how many waiting lists you can add patients to. So you could have lots of different tick boxes added to the forms. But again, just another thing to show there. So just while we're talking about forms, there's another little change that we've made on forms. I'll just show it while we're here. So if I go into form results, one of the things that we were asked for is we've got different statuses of forms. So we've got forms that are in draft mode. We've got forms that have been completed where all the data that's necessary has been entered. And then we've got an idea of whether a form needs to be clinically signed off to be committed as a finished record to the patient EPR. So you can see I've got a mixture in here of different records. What we didn't do previously was display very well who had signed that off and when. So you can see we've got columns now of the signed off by and sign off date and time. And likewise, we, as well as building it into the form results app, when I go and bring up that patient's timeline, either in the side panel or full screen, we've got an idea here of who's created and signed off forms. So that's that form that we just went through in clinic there a moment ago. So it's just trying to make this a little easier to see what all the data is about and who's entered it. Okay. So the next thing I want to go on to is just a little change that we've made regarding episodes of care. So one of the things that's notorious in London for the private hospitals and NHS private units down there is that patients aren't always seen for all appointments across their treatment journey by the same provider. So what I'm meaning is a patient could be seen in one hospital, have their procedure at a different hospital and have their follow-up at Harley Street. So you don't necessarily always own all of the patient pathway. And what this used to lead to is a lot of episodes of care, a lot of referral records within the system that were left open because you were never really sure whether you were fully done seeing the patient or not. And likewise, over the last year or two, with hospitals being shut down and things like that for periods of time, that's become harder to know whether even if you're outside of London, whether patients are still going to be coming back to you for treatment or not and things like that. So there's a lot of clients have now got a number of episodes of care, those referral records, that are just left open. And what we wanted to do was provide a bit of a housekeeping tool for you to be able to clear those up. So what I'll do is I'll just go on and I'll search for a new app that we've created. Again, it's permission controlled, so not every user would have access to this. But I've got a new app called Episode of Care Cleanup. It's quite simple to use. Basically, you would go through, you look at your date range. So I know I've got some quite old data on here. So I'm just going to say from when I started my system back in 2015 up until maybe the end of 2020 or something like that, or 2019, maybe we'll just go through and say 31st of the 12th, 2019. I want you to find any record where there isn't an active booking in progress, there isn't an incomplete waiting list. So basically it's sat there as just an open referral with nothing waiting to happen. And then what you can do is say what completion reason you want to use. So I've just created one called assumed complete. You could call it what you like, and we will select that, and then I can go through and generate. And because I've got relatively limited data on my system, it's only going to come through and identify 3 episodes of care that need to be cleared down. But on your systems, that could be many, many more than that. So if you want to adjust that date range, you can do so by hitting reset, and you can expand it out or lessen it depending on what you're doing. Otherwise, you can just hit clean up and it will go through and we'll put that completion reason and today's date into all of those episodes of care just to clean them up. So just again, another little change, but hopefully it makes things a lot easier and would be a nice little housekeeping task to keep on top of, just so that when your bookings teams are making appointments for people, they can make sure they're assigning them to the right episodes of care. Okay. So the next area I want to go on to is medical record tracking. So we've made a couple of changes here. One, to help better identify where a record is at any point in time, but also two, to just simplify the processes that were available within that screen. So I'm just going to go on to my medical record tracking app. I've got it pinned here. And it's showing me currently, because of my filter pane, all of the records that I've got that are currently reserved. Just so we're dealing with a little bit less data, I'm just going to say, you know what, only show me stuff that's due today. So it's going to go through, and then we've just got my couple of patients that were booked for today. So in terms of medical record tracking, we've not changed anything about how the records end up in this screen. So when you go through and make an outpatient appointment, it will still go and reserve or put a reservation request in, which is what you're seeing here for the paper file, the medical record, to be retrieved from the file room and made available to where it needs to go. So if I look at Jessica Johnson here, we can see that this file's been reserved for an appointment today between 12:30 and 1 o'clock, and it needs to go to the outpatient department to room 1 for Dr. Jones. So the job of the medical records team would be to go through and mark this file as being prepared and then checked out. So just a couple of changes that we've made in this screen before I go on to that is we've tried to simplify the menus across the top. So we've got this new option at the top. This now drills down into a separate sub-menu of new reservation and new quick checkout. So as I say, the entries in this grid normally get here automatically by an outpatient or an inpatient booking being made. But if a department needs a record for some reason, they're able to come in here and click that new reservation, and it will say, you know what, finance need a copy of the record for a period of time because there's been a billing query or whatever it might be. The other thing that we've done under this menu is put in quick checkout. This previously used to be sat as a little sub menu under checkout, and what we were finding was that users were getting confused about what they were clicking. A quick checkout essentially ignores any reservation that you might have been looking at within the screen and just says, you know what, I'm giving that record to finance, but there isn't a reservation. It just allows you to hand it over but say where it's gone. So we've moved those away to a different menu. And then in terms of checking out this record for Jessica, what we've done is we used to have separate checkouts for checkout with barcoding or checkout selected. We've just gone for checkout now. So you can multi-tag if you had got all these files ready and you could check them all out, or you could do one and click checkout, and you could then see from the barcode scanning icon here that you could go ahead and scan any of the records you were going to be sending to a particular location. For this moment, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it as the one record, and I'm going to say, yes, I've got that file ready. It now needs to go off to that consultant's medical secretary. So I'm just going to search my system, and we're going to give that to Imogen in this case as the medical secretary. And a new field that we've added on here is called location. So we know that it's meant to be on its way to outpatients, but actually where's it going on its way there? So I'm going to say, in this case, it's going to the administration block, and I can now check that out. And so if I go back into this patient record, we'll just have a look at those that are currently checked out, and we will pick Jessica's record. If I just drill onto her record, what we've done is we've now added the location of where that's checked out to. So on the patient banner, it previously just used to say checked out outpatients, but actually it hasn't made it there yet. So it's now saying checked out administration. If I just drill into this so that we can have a look at the record again, what we're able to do is we've got this option at the top here called update current record holder, which again has been simplified just to one menu rather than two. You can update that and we'll actually say, you know what, it has now made it to the consultant Dr. Jones and it has now made it to outpatients. So it's also worth noting whilst I'm in here, and because I'm an admin, I can adjust the screen, that either of these fields can be made mandatory. So if you want to make sure that that location is always being captured, so you always know from looking at the patient banner or looking at the medical record tracking app where that paper file is at any point in time, you can make this mandatory and obviously make sure that you capture it. So I'm just going to move that over to outpatients, update it. And just as I hit close on here, you'll see that's updated straight away in the background to say it's now is at outpatients where it was meant to be going. And the final thing that would happen is that this record would get checked back in. So I'm just going to go to check in and we're going to say, yes, we're done with this now. And it's going to end up back in the medical records room. Of course, it could have gone back to the medical secretary first, in which case we could have done another update holder. But I'm just going to check it in. And it's saying, OK, date and time, check it in, barcode scan any other records that we're checking in at the same time, and then check in. And so the other little change that we've made, as well as showing that this was on its way there, but it's now back and stored, is on the patient banner, instead of just saying available, we've opted to update it to say it's available in the medical records room, just to make it a little clearer. In a future build, not this one, we are looking at how we could also, for new patients registered on the system, how we could go ahead and show on here that the record didn't exist yet and needed to be created, just because at the moment it would look like the records were available for all new patients, but we'll cover that in a future release. So the next bit I wanted to go on to were just a couple of little changes around order communications and rooms. So what we'll do is we'll just come out of this patient record and we will go to outpatient rooms. So I'm just going to type in rooms here and look for the code table for that. If I click onto here, and what we'll do is we'll just filter this down, and I want to pick my treatment room. So I've got a treatment room here, treatment room 1, and when I edit that, the change that we've made is previously you could only assign one modality type to a room. And so what that meant is you were saying that room is only available for that one type of test. So could have been for bloods to be taken or something like that. If that room has extra equipment in it, so maybe it has its own ultrasound, or maybe you can also do urology tests in there and things like that, it was difficult to book patients into that room because effectively the system was coming back saying, no, I'm afraid this treatment room or this phlebotomy room or whatever it might have been called is only available for pathology tests, not ultrasounds. So by changing that here, it's just expanded it up. And then if you were going through the scheduler app, which I'll just quickly open just to show it in action, if I change this from being looking at clinicians to looking at rooms, I'll look at my treatment rooms, I'll go to treatment room 1 and I'll go and make a new outpatient booking. We'll just pick any patient, doesn't really matter who, so we'll say it's Hannah Johnson and it's to do with this episode of care. When I go through and I go to add an order, previously it would have limited me down, but I can now pick a, let's say something to do with the hip, so I could do an ultrasound of the hip because we've said ultrasounds are allowed in here. And likewise, I could do something to do with blood, so we could do a full blood count or something like that and show that was also going on at the same time. So I'm not going to go and push all of that through because it's just a little config change in the background, but just another useful thing to make sure you're maximizing your rooms for everything that it can be used for. So just while we're looking at orders, the next thing I wanted to have a look at was one of my patients. So what I'll do is I'll just go to my find patients, and the patient I want to search for is called John Stevens, and we'll just have a look at John's record here. We'll open it up, and if I go into my outpatient bookings app for John, we've got 2 appointments due. They're all overdue now. Doesn't really matter what the date was, but we've got a consultation appointment, and that consultation has spurred a request for a PET CT, which has then been scheduled for later on that day rather than the patient coming back another day. So the change that we've made here is around charging. So previously what would happen is the consultation booking that requested the CT examination would have ended up as something called the originating booking, and that originating booking would be where the charges would traditionally flow back to. So what that would mean is Compucare was trying to be nice and helpful and make sure that you produce just one invoice for that patient to say, here's your £250 consultation fee and here's your £500 CT scan, or whatever the prices were. What we were finding is, particularly if these facilities are at different ends of the hospital or different floors and things like that, is that actually sites wanted the ability to be able to provide an invoice to that patient whilst they had them in front of them for just the consultation, whilst they were coming through outpatients, and then separately in radiology bill them for the scan that was done. So we've just added a little change to the scheduling settings in the background. So if I go to scheduling settings, and if I just scroll down this admin screen for how we set the system up, there's a new option down the bottom here, basically just a simple toggle that says, does it add the charges to the fulfillment booking, which is the scan booking in this case, the one performing that examination? Or if I toggle that to no, what it will do is keep adding the charges to the booking that requested that scan, so the consultation in this case. So I'll leave that as on. We'll just click apply. We'll just go back. We'll go back into John's record. We'll drill through to that order on the CT, just because it's easier to do it from here. And we'll say, you know what, that has now happened. So when we go to complete it, it's going to go through, get me to enter what I need to enter, which I could put some notes in to say it was all taken okay and record the radiographer and rad assistants, but I'll just leave it as it is for now. Hit save, hit finish. And now what it's doing, just as we described, is it's added the charge to the PET CT booking, so we can bill that in isolation of the consultation charges that might be going on. So you'll see when I drill into the charge, I've just got my £600 CT one area scan in this case. So might be something that helps you with your billing and making sure you're capturing charges along the patient's journey through the hospital, but it's up to you whether you set that as on or not. By default, it will be set to off, and Compucare will continue to work how it's always worked. Okay, so in the PowerPoint presentation, we had a look at the change that we'd made to the Clinicians app, which was around being able to show the consultant online the test results or the radiology reports that have come back so they can view them away from the hospital. I mentioned that we'd made some improvements to our notifications framework, and I'll just walk you through what those changes are. So what I'll do is I'll just come back to the home screen. We'll go on to the people area to find Dr. Jones. We'll just come out of her list of appointments. And when I go to edit Dr. Jones's record, we'll just let that come up and I look at my clinician role. We've always had what specialty are they and can they see outpatients and how long are their appointments and things like that. And down the bottom here, we've had the ability to say whether or not they receive notifications when an order result comes back or if a patient cancels and things like that. And previously what this would have done based on the consultant's correspondence preference is it would have sent them an in-system message, it would have sent them an email, or it would have sent them a text message, but it would have sent them a message for each and every test that they'd ordered. So if one patient needed, 18 different blood tests or something like that, or different pathology tests, that consultant was going to get pinged 18 times as each one of those got signed off by the lab system. And so we've got a new field on here called order summary notification profile, but it's basically saying how does this consultant, based on what's ticked here, how do they want to receive their notifications? So what I'll do is I'll just come out of this screen, we'll go back to home and I'll just show you a couple of little settings around that. So what I'll do is I'll just type in profile, got a new code table called notification profiles. And within here, we've then got the one that I've created, but you can have lots of different ones set up. So if I just give that a double click to edit it, And I've given it a name. I've said what template does it use, and I'll show you the templates in a moment. So this is basically set under the letter and SMS templates for the text that goes out to the consultant. I've got an option here as to whether results are copied into the medical secretary or not. So again, you could set up some profiles that do this and some that don't to meet the criteria of whether the consultant wants their MedSec copied into these things. How Compucare is going to derive that is basically by looking at the clinician's record and which at the MedSec's record and whether they have an allocated clinician, and if they do, it's then going to use that as the link to know that there's someone that gets copied into this clinician's results. What I've also done is set the frequency down the bottom here. So I've said, you know what, don't send them all the time because that's just going to be, you know, lots of messages going out. Just look every 5 hours between Monday and Friday, between some sociable hours, so we're not pinging things to people at 10 o'clock at night and things like that. Between these hours across a working week, send a message to the consultant about the results that have come back for their requested tests. I've also said that I want that to be cumulative. So instead of pinging in that example, 18 different, you've got some results back, actually we can sum it up for them and say, you know, send them one message that is telling them how many they've got. We can also, if we really want to do, when we're creating these different profiles, we can also filter it down. So we could end up saying they don't really care. You know, they'll dial in and get it when they get it for the radiology stuff, but the blood stuff they want to get, you know, notifications are back all the time. So I've left mine blank to be just send them everything that's come back for them, but you can, there's a lot of configuration here that you can play with. The only other thing I'll show on this, and it's just under the letter template. So if I just search for letter designer, it's just going to bring that up. There's a new section here called Order Processing Summary SMS, and this is then the text that would be sent out for the consultant on this profile. So you can see it's made up of some text I've typed and some inserts based on things that the system already knows. So, dear Dr. Jones, today you've received 18 new reports for your requested orders. Please log into Compucare and action these and view them. You know, thanks, Streets Heaver Hospital in this case. So just a nice little change to hopefully make those notifications more useful to the clinicians and stop spamming them as much. Okay, so we're just going to move on to the last two pieces that I've got to show, and then we'll take a little break. So what I'll do is I'll just close out of here. We'll go back to the home screen. And what we're going to look at now are some changes that we've made in the provider ledger. So the first thing I want to do is go and look at my ledger settings. So if I go to ledger settings, I've got within here an administration fee charge. So for the hospitals that are collecting surgeons' fees and anaesthetist fees on behalf of those parties, you've generally charged an administration fee for collecting their fees on their behalf, doing the credit control for them and things like that. Previously, this was just one flat rate, so it didn't give you a lot of flexibility in terms of what you'd negotiated with your different consultants and the payment criteria that you might have set. So you'll see that we still have an admin fee that goes onto the consultant's account, but we've now been able to specify either by percentage or fixed amount across the system, whether the percentages differ for paying the balance straight away or waiting for full payment or part payment. So in my case, I've said I'm going to charge a 10% admin fee for just paying the money before the hospital's actually received it off the insurance company or embassy and things like that. And if I wait for full payment, I'm only going to charge 5% in this case. So these settings, when you load this update, will all come in, but they'll all end up being whatever your admin fee was. So it'll all work exactly like it's worked previously. But if you did want to come and adjust any of these, you could come and adjust them. So the next piece of how this then works is if I come out of this settings screen and we'll just go back to Dr. Jones and we'll just drill into Dr. Jones's profile again. And we will have a look at her provider role. So you'll see here, I've got when we collect professional fees on behalf of Dr. Jones, how do we do that? Do we wait for us to get the money in before we pay her, or do we pay her straight away? So if I was to say, you know what, we've agreed we're going to start paying her straight away, I could change that. And in the background here, it's showing me that that is going to be 10%, but you get this other option that's new here to override that percentage. So whilst it's 10% generally across the system, if I click override admin fee, I could actually change that up or down. So I could say, you know what, I'm going to charge 12% to Dr. Jones for doing that. But it does have a new field here as well called override reason. And that is a code table. I've just set up a couple of entries, but I'm going to say, you know what, I'm charging 12% because I'm also providing secretarial services or something like that. It might be, if I just cancel out of these, that if we were still waiting on full payment or something like that, that would be a normal 5% fee. But maybe for Dr. Jones, because she's worked with us for the last 10 years and things like that, we've got a contract with her specifically that says we don't charge you an admin fee at all. So in which case, whilst new consultants coming through would get charged 5% in this case, we can override it to 0, and we can then say, you know what, we've got a contract with her not to charge, or however you'd want to phrase that. And so when you go and do your provider payment run, which will look through what's due to be paid to Dr. Jones for the month, it will then work out the right admin fee to apply based on all of this. So the only other little change that we've made is that actually you might want to pay your consultants differently based on the type of funding source that the patient has come from. And so I've got another option in here called use purchaser category. And what this means is if I just come out of the screen for Dr. Jones and go back to the home screen, is if I look at my categories again, and we will find purchaser category, I can now differ the admin fee that I charge and the way that I charge it based on the different type of funding source. So if we were to say NHS work, it might be for NHS work, we pay the balance straight away to the consultant, because effectively the work's come in contracted to the hospital and the consultant's then taking on that work on behalf of the hospital. So we might want to make sure that they're paid straight away in that case. On the self-funding or private insured, we might want to say, you know what, we don't pay them till we receive the money, so wait for full payment. And just as a third example to round it off, it might be with the embassies who can be poor at paying, that we might want to release monies as and when we receive them and allow part payments for embassy patients and things like that related to the works that the consultant's done. So once you've configured these within here, you can then apply them like you saw on Dr. Jones's record, and now we've got lots of extra configuration there for you to be able to hopefully cover all of the different types of admin fees that you've negotiated with your consultants. So the last thing that I'm going to go on to is provider room rentals. So we'll just come out of the screen for a moment, and currently a number of the clients are charging room rentals to consultants for use of the outpatient consultation rooms. Effectively, that consultant is bringing through their private practice to your facility. You want to charge them use of the room to make sure that you know, you're getting a cut of the money for those consultations. So previously, how this would have been done is you would have gone to our provider invoicing, and you would have gone in there and created a new invoice, and you would have manually worked out outside of the system how many times they'd used your rooms that month, and you would have then created charges on that invoice accordingly. In a recent build, we had introduced a new app called Provider Charges, and I've got it here and I've already got some entered. So this was kind of the first step of this process of starting to automate these charges based on the information that Compucare already knows. So I've got some that I've entered for Dr. Jones here, but could have been other consultants as well. And so what this new screen did here is it allowed you to start building up your charges throughout the month, and then you could come to the end of the month, you could tag them all, and you could say bill and produce one or multiple invoices depending on how many different providers you had listed in here. So you can see when I just click on a room and I click on that, I can say what the charge is and any reference around what it relates to, and that was all well and good, but you were still basically having to manually enter all of this information. So the next thing we've been tasked with is, well, Compucare knows a lot of this information. It knows how many times the consultants used the room based on the availability records that you have set up with, Dr. Jones working every Tuesday in consultant room 3 or whatever it might be. And it also knows, well, how many patients have been seen in those rooms and things like that. So just a couple of little changes that we've made. If I just go and search, we've got a new screen altogether called Provider Contracts. So if I click onto Provider Contracts, I've got a couple that I've already set up, and they're just ones dated for this year in essence. So we can start to bill consultants for their room use either by how much of the room was allocated to them. So 3 hours on a Wednesday could be billed or something like that, or how much time was actually used out of that allocation. So if they had a 3-hour slot but only used 1.5 hours for patients, well, maybe we're only going to bill them the 1.5 hours. So just to quickly run through how some of this works, we'll start out with the availability record based one. We'll go on to the name of it, which is just what I've given it. And then we have a contract rule similar to the patient contract side where I've configured some of this. So if I just open that up, I've said that I want to base my charging around availability, so those reservations of the rooms. I want to round it up to the nearest 30 minutes, and this is the charge that I want to use, which happens to be a 15-minute charge in this case at £50 an hour, which might be a bit high, but we'll leave it as it is. So once you've created your provider contract, what you then do, if we go back to Dr. Jones and go onto her record, is against that provider role, just like we allocated, well, how do we pay her? We also say, well, how do we charge her? So you can see here, I've allocated this year's contract for provider availability to her record. And then if I go back to my home screen, I can show you how Compucare then generates this. So what we've got is we've got a new app called Generate Room Rental Charges. So we'll click onto that, and you can then put in a date range, and you can specify whether it's all your providers or whether you're doing a specific one. Just to keep things easy, I'm just going to stick with my one example consultant. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at my room rentals, maybe from the middle of July or something like that, just to keep the date range short. So we'll look at middle of July to end of July, go and generate those charges. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through, look at that contract that's assigned to Dr. Jones, work out what basis we charge her on, and then per day that there was a room rental going on, add room rental charges. Now, because I opted to use a 15-minute charge, and because these were some quite long sessions in the consultation room, I've ended up with 6 hours of room rental equaling 24 lots of 15 minutes. But essentially my charge is correct here for £50 an hour, plus VAT, which is what's getting added onto this gross amount. So I could switch on the VAT column as well here if I wanted to see it. So once I was happy that that was all correct, I could hit save on here, and those would go and stack up in that provider charges app. And then I could go and actually produce that invoice when I was ready to go and do it. What I'm going to do is hit cancel on here, and I'll just show you by time as well. So again, there's a contract for time that has a little bit more configuration on it. So we'll just go back to provider contracts. We'll go on to the contract that I've set up around time. We'll go to the rule that I've added that's a time-based rule, not an availability-based rule. This time I've said, you know what, just round by 15 minutes, not per half an hour, but you can see you can change it in the drop-down. But I've also said, actually, there's lots of different configurations I want to try and base this on. So I've got a standard one at the bottom, which if I drill into it, basically says, regardless of the site that the patient is seen at and regardless of the room type, I want to charge a minimum of £50 per 15-minute reservation. It is possible within here that you might want to, if the consultant was using a treatment room and not an ordinary consultation room, you might want to vary the charging, so you can build lots of different configurations up in here. The other thing that I've done, if I just have a look at this one, is I've said, well, that's okay if it's their private practice coming through, but if it's NHS work that the hospital's received and I now want to get them to fulfill, maybe I don't want to be charging them a rental on that particular element. So if I just bring this one up, what I've then said is, actually, when it's an NHS patient coming through clinic, I don't want to charge anything. So I've got a charge set up called no charge, and you can see it's coming out here just grayed out with the 0 charge. So once all of this is configured, what we can do is we can go back to Dr. Jones. We'll just flip her over to the other way of charging, and you wouldn't do this often at all. Normally you'd set it once per provider and that would be it, but we'll say actually we're going to start billing her by time. So I'm going to hit save on there, just hit finish. I'm going to go back to my home screen. I'm going to go back to my generate room rental charges. I'm going to expand my date range a little bit just to bring this to June to now. I'm going to say, you know what, let's just do it for Dr. Jones again to keep it simple, and I'm going to click generate. So this time it's going to go through and find me charges, and they're all going to stack in per appointment in the diary. So you can see here I've got 3 different charges for the 4th of June. So on that particular day, if we were to look at the diary, what you would see behind the scenes is there had been 2 private patients, both half an hour long, and 1 NHS patient that had gone through that clinic that day. So because of that, we've then ended up with the 2 private charges as per the contract that we just looked at, and the 0 charge for the NHS one that we're not going to bill for. So hopefully between all of this, and there is a bit of config here to do, and you know, you're welcome to contact our support desk to ask for advice on this. You can start to configure some of this in your test system, get to grips with it, and then you can roll it out to your live system and hopefully save yourself lots of time being able to generate these room rentals a lot more automatically than they are at the moment. So in terms of the items that I was going to go through, that's everything I was going to show for now. We're just going to bring up the slides again, and I'm just going to mark this over as a little coffee break. It looks like we're pretty much on 2:15. So what we'll do is we'll take a break for 10 minutes. We'll come back at 25 past, and Mark will take you through some of the other enhancements that we needed to go through.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to our summer webinar. Hopefully you've had time to grab a quick drink. So hopefully you found it useful so far. I just want to say a quick reminder that we do have a Q&A session going on. If you can find that from the Teams bar. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to put them in there on any of the enhancements we're showing you today. So I'm just going to jump into my system just so we can start having a look at some more of the enhancements. So just bear with me a second. Okay, so hopefully my Compucare has come up there. So the first one I just wanted to have a look at is I'm just going to jump into our check-in screen so we can have a look at our first enhancement. So what we've done in our check-in screen is we've added a few new columns so that the outpatient staff can more easily see which of our appointments are face-to-face. So they can also see what different contact types they've got on the appointments as well. So if we just have a look at the ones I've got loaded up in our example here, you can see there's an is face-to-face column here. So you can see we've got 3 on yes and 1 on no. You can also see here we've got a contact type column. So in the contact type, you can see the one that's no. We can also see that's a Microsoft Teams consultation. Similarly, we can filter these down. So if I just go into show more filters here, you'll see that we've also got this contact type and is face-to-face filter. So if I just show you, if we just go on to the no, what should happen is it filters it down and it brings us up only the one that's not face-to-face. So if I just cross that off. Similarly, if I go onto the contact type, and if I went onto the Microsoft Teams consultation one, you can see again that filters it down to the correct one we need to look at. So that was the first enhancement I wanted to show you, just a quick new filtering we've added onto our screens. In check-in. So for our next enhancement, what we've done is we've added 2 new fields into our patient record. So these fields allow the patient to be able to consent to data usage for medical research and also for marketing purposes as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into one of our patients here. So if we have a look at Ellen James, I'm just going to click Edit Patient. If I scroll to the bottom of this screen, you'll see we've got these 2 new fields at the bottom here. So like we said, one of them is for consenting to data usage for marketing, and the other one is consenting to data use for research. So this enhancement's been brought in 8.34. So you'll see that automatically these are toggled to no, because what we want to encourage is we want to encourage people to actually consent and consent into this rather than have automatic consent. So if we can see what it's doing and how it saves and bits like that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the consents to data use for marketing. I'm going to toggle that to on for this patient and just click save. So you'll see we're back in our check-in screen now. If I just arrive the patient, just so we can see what this is doing in the background, I'm just going to go on to confirm patient details. And you'll see at the bottom, those preferences that we put in, they've saved into that patient record there. So if I just come back out of this and go into our e-registration form in the post actions, so I'm just going to change this one out and put in this registration form. So I'm just going to fill in some of the mandatory fields. So just fill in an address and a telephone number as well. So what you'll see is it's defaulted on the form to the ones we've already set against this patient. So as you can remember, we set the marketing ones on and the medical research ones are off. So if we changed our mind, if we said, oh, well, the patient's just told us now as we're doing this registration form, actually they're happy for their details to be used for medical research now. So if we just toggle that one on and click save, you'll see you get this other post action which pops up. So I'm just going to click on edit the patient again, because we've got some different answers in this registration form. We're going to have to put them into the patient record. You can see it's brought up our registration form on the right hand side here, just so we can cross clarify the details. If I scroll down to the bottom, you'll see it saved those preferences we've just put in. So I'm just going to fill those in on the patient record as well. So you can see we'll just tick that on to yes, just so that it matches the registration form. And if we click save, that will save into their patient record. So that's the next one I wanted to show you. For our next enhancement, I'm just going to go into our outpatient booking screen to show you this one. So as you'll have seen when Stu was doing some of the enhancements when he was demoing, we've got a slightly new filter screen I just wanted to touch on briefly. So our new filter screen, what it'll do is it'll only keep active filters in your pane on the left hand side. So you can see we've got some details filled in both the site, status and the date. So because we've got something filled in, it's just put those into our active filter pane here. If you wanted to filter down any further, if you just click on the show more filters button, and if we filled in another one, so if we said we only want to see the appointments by one of our doctors called Roger Wilson, and if I just click that out, it'll filter it down. But you'll also see when we go back into the filters pane, it's now put this field into the active filters along with the others. Similarly, if I cross that filter off and then just click on this hide unset filters again, you'll see that it drops that off. So that's the new filters we've added into our system. Just to show you where this is in our settings, if I just go into our global settings and system settings, down at the bottom here, you'll see this enable V2 filters pane. So it will automatically, this enhancement's in 833. When you upgrade to 833, this will automatically toggle on to yes, and it'll set that as your preference. If you change this, what you'll just have to do is you just have to restart your Compucare system, and then it'll apply that change for you. So I'm just going to go back into our outpatient booking screen. Just while I'm in here, I just wanted to mention another new enhancement we've done. So in our filters pane, we've now added this new filter called treatment function. So if I wanted to, again, if I just show you how this works, if we put in cardiology there and just click the little arrow, you see it's filtered down by that. And as we was just saying, again, it's just dropped that into our active filters pane. So that's a new filter that we've added in treatment function. We've added that into both our check-in and outpatient booking screen as well. Okay, so moving on from that one, the next one I want to have a look at is, I'm just going to go into our outpatient rooms to start having a look at this one. And into a room I've set up. So for this enhancement that we've added, what we've done is we've set up the ability to be able to set restrictions against a room now. So this will follow through into the outpatient bookings as well as next free screens and bits like that. So you can see I've gone into our ear, nose and throat examination room. If we just have a look at the new fields that we've got, the first one we've got is this allowable age ranges. So you can see this is a mandatory field I've got set up. You'll see if you just click on the arrow, it gives you the ability to set it to adults, peds or both. We've also added a couple of more fields to be able to restrict against the room. So we've got room procedures here. You can see against this one, for example, I've just put the ear NEC and nose NEC as the room procedures. We've also got this final field that we've added called the room treatment function service. So just to show you how this works, I'm going to go back into our outpatient booking screen. And I'm just going to take off the cardiology filter there. And if I just do a new booking, just so we can have a quick look at this. And I'm just going to put a patient in there. So we won't save this booking off, so I'm not going to fill in an episode of care or anything like that for the moment. So if I just fill in the room, so remember it's the ear, nose and throat examination room. Once I've put that into the room field, it will start limiting down some of the other fields in this add outpatient booking screen. So the first one it's going to limit is the treatment function service. So if I click on that, if you can remember in our code table, we set that in this room, you can only have ENT as the treatment function service for this room. So it's limited me down to that. Something else that it'll do is if you go into the planned procedures for the room, just put an episode of care in. And if we go into here, you see similarly, it's put the ear NEC and the nose NEC. They're the only procedures we allowed in this room, so it has restricted the room by those as well. So if I just come out of that and click Don't Save, this follows through into our clash management system. So if I click a slot, I'll just put that back in. Find a slot, and then you'll see if I just click on procedure here, you'll see that this is followed through into here as well. So it does follow through into the outpatient next free screen as well on the limitations. Similarly, this will work in reverse. So if you put your treatment function service in first, it will limit down the rooms to the rooms that are available for that treatment function. So it's worth keeping that in mind as well. Okay, so for our next one, I'm going to have a look at outpatient rooms again. So this is another enhancement we've added into that. So if I just come out of that. So I'm just going to go into a different room this time. So we're just going to have a look at the endoscopy room. So what we've done now is we've added a new toggle in the rooms called Exclude from Notifications. So if you've got your Compucare system set up to remind patients that their appointment's coming up, and also to have for a text message to come out after their appointments happened, what we've done now is we've added this new toggle that excludes them from those notifications. So the main purpose of this is if you've got a room, for example, the endoscopy room might have this, where you've got another system which isn't Compucare running the system. You might be getting the reminder messages from that system instead out to the patient. So you don't want duplicate messages coming out from Compucare as well. So just to show you this, I'm just going to click that onto yes, and we're going to have another look at one of our outpatient bookings again. So for the patient here, when it loads up, if we just click into that room again, you'll see that it's saved that preference for the excluding from notifications. So it'll save that in so that they won't receive a notification when they're just before their appointment, depending on the reminder days you set in your settings on Compucare. Perfect. So I'm just going to come out of that. So the next enhancement I wanted to take a look at, we've now added the ability to be able to add a second room. So the reason behind this user story is to give clinicians the ability to book a secondary room alongside their primary room. This is just to cater for greater requirements rather than booking two different slots. This can be now done from one outpatient booking. So I'm just going to set up a new outpatient booking just to show you how this one works and how it runs through into a couple of our other systems. So I'm just going to pick a patient here. So I'm just going to pick Jeff Holder and put in the episode of care. So I'm going to set a clinician on this one to Dr. Wilson again, like we've been using before. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to find a slot. So this will load up our outpatient next free screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to book it into a slot this afternoon. So if we go for the 4 o'clock slot, and I'm just going to reserve that. So you'll see that's put it into the consultant room 42, which is the one that Dr. Wilson's operating in this afternoon. You'll see that it's come up with the green to suggest that this has been reserved. So what I'm going to do is just to show you how the secondary room works on this. You can see it's popped up here in blue. So if I click it, it'll open another search bar for you. So if we said, as just an example, I just wanted to select X-ray room 1 for the secondary room. You'll see it has changed the slot here. It's just changed it to yellow. So it's suggesting that this hasn't been reserved because it does use our clash management similarly to the first room. So if I go ahead and click on that and click reserve and just fill in a billing episode. I can put that to self-pay and yes on that. So if we just click reserve, you'll see it's put this room through the clash management again, and it said, yeah, that's all okay, that's been reserved. So just to see this in action, if we save that off and click finish on there, I'm just going to go into our scheduler to show you how this looks in there as well. So if I select our multiple resource scheduler, and I'm just going to select today, just so it brings up that appointment, and get rid of our filter screen. So what you can see it's done here is it's booked that appointment in for Jeff Holder. It's booked it in against Dr. Wilson's availability in the consultant exam room 42 at 4 o'clock as we put in the outpatient next free screen. It's also booked it in this side slot here. So it's booked it into the X-ray room 1, which we specified we wanted as our secondary room. So it does give you that ability to put them against both in the scheduler so you can see what's going on in that room. If you try and drag and drop, so if we said, oh, actually, we don't want X-ray room 1 as our secondary resource anymore, I'm just going to put it into consultant room 43. It'll pull up our screen here. It comes back into that edit outpatient booking screen. It's saying, are you sure you want to change that to the exam room 43? Again, it will use the clash management just to check that that's okay and it's available for that slot, and it will move it into that room for you. Perfect. So that's everything I wanted to show you on that one. So next I wanted to have a look at another thing in our scheduler. So I'm just going to switch across to our single scheduler. And again, I'm just going to get rid of this filter screen here. So another enhancement that we've added the ability for clinicians to have the contact style flyout card on people. So if you've got clinicians open in your scheduler, what you'll now be able to see is certain information against the clinician. So you can see we've got Dr. Wilson open again here. If I just hover over this little doctor icon at the side here, you'll see it brings up some additional information. So this would be quite useful for your booking staff. What it's come up with, there's some booking notes against Dr. Wilson. So it's saying for clinic bookings, please allow the following time frames. So you can see it's put 30 minutes on new appointments and 20 minutes on the follow-up appointments. What it's also done is it's just put the genders and age ranges that Dr. Wilson can see. So it's pulled that from his clinician's record that you can edit. If you click on that, it will leave that up. Another enhancement we've added as well, we've just extended this enhancement. So what it does now is you've got this ability underneath, you can see it's brought up this information in a quick panel. So it's just giving you a bit of the information so you can see adults and peds as well as females and males as well. So it's just giving you a glimpse at both of those so you can see them at a quick view as well. Okay, so if I just go into our multiple scheduler, just so we can see how this works in here. So it does work in here as well. What you've got to do is, so if we look at Dr. Wilson on his availability here, if we just hover over it, you can see it comes out slightly differently to the single resource. And what it's done is it's just come up with that booking information again. And it's also come up with the ability of what you can see. So the genders of male and female, and it's also come up with those age ranges as well for the adults and peds. Perfect. So I'm just going to come out of our scheduler so I can show you our next enhancement. And I'm just going to go into an outpatient next free screen. Okay. So in this next development, what we've done is end users were requesting the ability to have notes against resources. So we have added this in now. We could do this from several different levels. I'm just going to start by looking at some equipment. So I've set up some equipment here for some adjustable rehabilitation steps. If I just go into the little edit icon, the little pencil at the side there, you'll see that this is a 24/7 availability for these steps, so you can set it against those as well. And in the notes field, I've just put, please return the rehabilitation steps to physiotherapy room 1 after use. So it gives those booking staff a bit more information about certain resources and what might be required when booking them in. So if I just click save on that, and I'm just going to select a room as well. So I'm just going to select physiotherapy room 4 for this example. If we just click finish, you see it brings up the outpatient next free appointment details screen. So what we can do here is, if we go into here, and if you click into a time slot, you'll see it's just brought up these notes in the reading panel on the right. So it's stacked them up. So we've got the ones for the adjustable rehabilitation steps that we wanted to see, and it's also stacked up the notes against the physiotherapy room. What we can do is you can actually do different notes against a room depending on different times for the resource. So you can see I've just put a note in this one saying group bookings only between 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. So if you went on an availability before 3 p.m, you'll see that it comes up with a different note in this screen here as well, saying it was individual bookings only. So if we just put the clinician in there as well, you can see that again, it will stack these notes up. So if we went into some of the availability, you'll see it's come up with the notes for the physiotherapy room that we set against that time. It's also come up with the notes for Dr. Wilson and the notes for the equipment that we wanted as well. So it will stack up these notes on that reading panel, dependent upon how many resources you've got selected. Fantastic. So moving on from that, the next enhancement I wanted to show you was it's in a new app we've created called Tag Manager. So some of you might have come across tags in the system before. For those of you that haven't, so the purpose of tags is to be able to categorize different screens. So you might put tags on outpatient bookings or inpatient bookings or patient transactions, for example. And what you can do is you could just filter that screen down by those tags just so you can group them together. So I've got a couple of tags in our screen here. The first thing I wanted to show you was just on this little filters icon here. If we go down to the tags, what you can see is the icons will light up when they've got linked resources against them. So you can see against my embassy patient tag, we've got some outpatient bookings linked into that one, and we've also got some patient transactions linked into it. The ones that are grayed out is just suggesting that we don't have any orders tagged with this one, and we don't have any inpatient bookings tagged with it either. So if I just run through the panel that we've got at the top here, of course the first one is new, so it'll just take you into this add tag screen. So if you type the name of the tag into there, and you can select whether you can put this record on stop or not. I'm going to give a bit more information about that shortly. So I'm just going to come out of that and not save it. So as you could see, it came up with the option to put the tag on stop or not. So if we just go into our filters panel on the left hand side, you'll see this is what you're able to filter by. So you can filter by those tags that are on stop or whether they're not. I'm just going to come back out of that. So we've got an edit one as well. So if I went into one of our tags, there's a few different ways of doing this, but if I went into it and wanted to just rename it, so if we said we're going to rename it to patient emailed cancellation. And click save there. You'll see it's just come up with a warning message for me. It's just saying, well, actually, you've already got a tag under this name. So there's a couple of things that you can do. You can either merge the tag or we can cancel out of it. So if we just click merge just to see what that does, we can see, oh, actually, you've already got a tag that says patient cancellation in email. It's just saying which tag do you want to keep. So we're going to keep the one that we've just renamed, and which one do you want to merge into that. So we're going to merge this one into it because it's a very similar tag. What it will do is when it merges, it will bring all of the linked resources to this tag, and it will put them into this one in the tag manager. So if we go ahead and do that, again, users would get given another warning box. So it just comes up to say, are you sure you want to do this? Because this is a process that can't be undone. So once you've merged two tags together, you can't unmerge them. It is a permanent change. So if we just click yes on that, you'll see it's got rid of that old tag and it's merged everything into this one now. For the next option, so you've got the option to delete tags. If there's nothing linked, you will just be able to delete the tag straight away if the user's got permission to do that in their security settings. If we just click delete on this patient email cancellation tag and click delete again, you can see it's just come up with another warning box here. So we've been quite cautious with this app, making sure that we're not deleting tags that have got records against them or anything like that. So it just prompts users quite a few times to say you might not want to do that and things like that. So it's just saying on this one, we're unable to delete the tag due to it being referenced. It's got linked records against it. So it's suggesting, do we want to put that tag on stop instead? So if we put that on stop, you'll see it comes up with that red icon at the side. It will allow you to filter by that now. And it just gives it an on-stop date, which you can change when you click into the tag. If users then try and click delete again, it's just going to come up with this warning box saying you can't delete the tag because it's got those linked records against it. It just tell them actually that tag's been placed on stop, so you could use that instead. Okay, so I'm just going to take this one off stop again. Perfect. And so I just want to move past view in a second, so we'll have a look at that in a moment. You'll see that you've got these three ellipses at the side, and what it gives you the option to do here is, again, we've got that tag merge option, so you can go into that from this screen here. We've also got the option to come up with the audit logs here. So if we click into audit logs, you can see similarly to quite a few places in Compucare, it will just say when this tag was created and if there's been any modifications against it as well. So you can see it's come up with that modification there that I just did, and it's just saying that I took that off stop. So the final panel is the view panel. So this is the panel that you'll use when you want to filter down different screens by the different tags that you're using. So you can see I'm on the patient email cancellation one now. It lets you go into the different screens to filter down by that. So I'm just going to use our outpatient bookings as an example for this one. So you can see it's brought us into the outpatient booking screen, and it's just set up this filter at the side that says you've currently got it filtered by the patient email cancellation tag. If I just scroll down on one of our bookings on the reading panel on the right here, you'll see it's got those tags against it. So it has got that one that we've just clicked by. In your outpatient booking screen, if you wanted to filter by a different tag, you can just click in a reading pane on a patient. So if I click embassy patient, you'll see it does refilter the screen for you. So it does that as well. Similarly, when we go into an outpatient booking, this applies to new outpatient bookings as well as editing them. You'll see this is where we can add the tags just at the bottom of the screen here. You might just have to change your screen layout. You'll get a message just to say there's new fields available in this screen. So if you go into that, you'll see that you can add this new tags field here at the bottom. So you can cross off the tags you've already got against the patient, or I can also add tags there as well. So you can see it just comes up with your drop-down menu of the tags you've got available. Okay, so I'm just going to come back out of that. Perfect. And so yeah, it is available in all different screens as well. So like I said, we've got several different screens this is available in, as you can see here. Just to show you how this looks in a different screen, if I go onto our embassy patient tag, and you can see we've got a patient transaction here, which again, it's got that tag against it in the reading pane. So they will come up as different colors in different screens as well. So that's one of our new categorization tools, which we're hoping that people will find useful. Perfect. So I'm just going to come out of that. That's everything I wanted to show you for our new tag manager. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go into a patient to show you our next enhancement. So if I just go into Mr. Jeff Holder here. For our next enhancement, what we've done is we've added the ability to create to put timestamps on notes. So if I click into Jeff Holder's notes here, you can see I've added a couple of different notes. Just going to drag that back down to there. A couple of different notes. You can see that a few of these are on the same day. So we've got quite a few that are on the 20th here. What it does is it now puts a timestamp against these as well. So if you filter down by this column, and if we just switch that round, you'll see what it's done is the ones that are set on the 20th, it's now put those in time order as well. So you can see we've got 840, 843, and 844. It is worth noting though, if you drag the column header to group by that column header, if you drag that into the top, it will go back just to doing it by the created on date. So it will get rid of those timestamps if you filter by that way. Perfect. So for the next one I wanted to show you, what we've done is we've added audit logs to clinicians availability. So I'm just going to go into one of our clinicians so I can show you how this works. So if we go into Dr. Rose Putney here, and I'm just going to go into her availability. So as you can see here, I've got a clinician availability for outpatient setup for Dr. Rose Putney. If we just click on the little arrow, what it'll do is it'll bring out all of those different Thursday appointments which are in this availability. So we've now added the audit logs. So if I click on the three arrows and just go into audit logs, you see it's come up with a few different things here. So it's saying this is when the availability was created. So it gives you those audit logs. It also gives you different audit logs for if you modify or delete any records as well. So if we just come up with an example of that, if I just go into this, and if we say actually for this date range, Dr. Putney's no longer going to be doing this date in August. So if we just delete that one, and you can see that's dropped out of the screen now. So if we go back into our audit logs, you see that comes up at the top. So again, it's date and time stamped that at the top. And it said that I just deleted availability there. So it comes up with what's happened on that record. Similarly, if we went into it and we changed the availability, so if we say we're no longer going to have this outpatient availability from 11 till 3, we're now going to have it from 10 o'clock till 3 instead, and click save. And finish there. Again, if we go back into those audit logs, it will just show that up for us. So it's just saying this user has modified that at this date and time, and they've actually changed the from time on the availability to 10 o'clock. So that's new functionality that we've added there. Okay, so for our last for the last enhancement I want to show you today, I'm just going to go into a different Compucare system that I've got logged in as one of our clinicians. So you'll see we're logged in as Dr. Wilson here. And what we've done here is we've managed to speed up the process of outpatient consultations. And what we've done is we've done this by auto signing off forms. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the forms code table just so we can have a look how this is set up. So if I just go into forms here and into that. What I've done is I've got a form here that's set up against Dr. Wilson. It's a Bloods and CT form. I appreciate these might not be something that's together, but I just wanted to show different service requests. If we scroll down to the bottom of the form, you can see there's a couple of things going on here. So we've got the auto signing off. So we're saying after 2 days, if it hasn't been signed off, this form needs to sign off. And then we've also added this new toggle here, which is sign off on completion. So I've toggled this to yes. So what we're saying is as soon as the appointment's gone through, we want it to sign off that form straight away. So if I just save that off and come back out of that, I'm just going to go back in. I'm just going to go into our clinicians view for Dr. Wilson. And you can see we've got a couple of patients waiting here. So we can see that Sharon's arrived. So I'm just going to go into the appointment from the clinicians view. And you can see what we've done here is we've got this form to default into Dr. Wilson. So it's defaulted in on his follow-up appointments. I've put a date and time stamp in here, and you can see that the service requests have come up here. So there's both that CT spine lumbar one that we had set, and there's also the full blood count. I'm going to leave both of these unticked at the moment because we're saying we do want both of those service requests. I'm just going to put NA in that mandatory field at the bottom there. So if we complete the appointment, and it'll come up with the post action screen. So I'm just going to click finish on that. And I'm just going to go back into our outpatients booking screen just so we can see what this has done. So if I go on to, if I just filter this down, so if we just put in the completed appointments as well, just so we can see what that one's done. You can see it's come up with Sharon here, the one that we've just done. So if I click into the form results, the little icon there on the right, you see it's come up as purple here. It's saying that that form has been signed off, and it's been signed off by Dr. Wilson. So it's timestamped that as a minute ago. So that was when we completed the appointment. So it's signed that form straight off for us. If I just go back as well, and I'm just going to go into the little orders icon, we can see that's flashing up green at the top. Because it's signed that form off straight away, what it's also done is it's also dropped both of these service requests in. So we've got the CT spine lumbar there, and we've also got the full blood count. And you can see it's put both of these as requested because it's signed that form straight off. So it's also worth noting that any forms that you've added manually, you'll also be able to do auto sign off on those as well. So it's worth keeping that in mind. Perfect. So that's everything I wanted to show you for the rest of our key enhancements between 8.33 and 8.35. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pass you back over to Stu, and he's going to run us through any notable questions that have come up during the webinar, and he's also going to close us off for today.
Okay, so as Mark's just said, we've come to the end of the enhancements that we were going to demonstrate. We're just going to go over and have a look at some of the questions that have come through on the Q&A panel, and obviously this is your chance to ask any other questions that you might have, just again using that Q&A panel in the chat. So let me just take this over and we'll have a look. So, okay, we've got quite a few. So let's have a quick look at the first one. So this is to do with the medical record tracking, looking at it and current holder and making it non-mandatory. So let me just bring my system up and we'll have a quick look around how this currently works. So if I go into my medical record tracking app and take a quick look at it, we can see here that I've got some records that are currently checked out. We probably want to have a look at some that are reserved initially. So we'll say that we've got this record for whenever it was needed, and we're just going to check this out now. So at the point of checking things out, you've got this, who am I giving it to and where is it being given at or to? So we know it's on its way to outpatients gateway A. Okay, so I think my screen probably wasn't quite sharing there, so I've just reshared that. I've just come into the medical record tracking app and I've gone to check out a medical record. We've got new holder here, and as part of that, we're able to specify who are we giving it to. You can see when I go to edit the screen that you can currently set that as being mandatory or non-mandatory. So when I make it mandatory, the star appears, and when I take it off, it's not there. And likewise, would suggest that you would probably want to put this onto the location as well, just to make sure that you're always saying where you've handed it over to. So I think the question that's come up is probably not at the initial point of checkout, but is if we were to look at records that were already checked out and in transit around the hospital, we've got this option at the top for update current holder. So if I go to update that current holder and have a look here, you can see that new holder is mandatory. And when I go to the configuration on this screen at the moment, I can certainly make the I'm giving it to the person at the admin block or the outpatient department or radiology or wherever it might be mandatory to record. But when I have a look at the current holder field, when we're doing an update of a current holder, it's making me, in the way the system's currently configured, fill out who I've given that to. And that isn't something that you can optionally switch off. So there's probably a little bit of an inconsistency there that we might need to just pick up on in a future release. But at the moment, certainly for checkout, you don't have to say who you've given it to. But if during its journey you're saying it's swapping between people, the system is currently expecting you to populate that. So I'll pick the question up with the client that's raised this particular question, and we'll see what the system wants to do in that regard. So I think just going back into the questions, the next one that we have is so is there a report to inform the user which episodes of care are being completed? So you looked when I was doing the demonstration at the episode of care cleanup app, and it told me there were 2 or 3 records to be resolved. It doesn't currently give you a printed report of that. It would be possible from the report generator to run a report on that episode of care cleanup reason that I had, so assumed complete in my example, and over a particular date range, so you'd be able to pick them up from there. Otherwise, the system is keeping an audit of that information as well. So if I just, again, go into my system, go to audit logs, we'll just ignore that one. And if we look at for today, because I've already had a quick look at this, 4 episodes of care, 4 modified, we can see that today, for various episodes of care, Stuart's been through and has, for patient number 1060, has basically set a completion reason and today's date as and when I did it. So it's all audited, but I'd suggest actually if you want to look at it in any detail, you probably want to be running a quick report generator report on all that information. Okay, we'll just have a look at the third question. So this is going all the way back to the receipts and the debit and credit card interface that we looked at right at the beginning. And so this is looking at, okay, so we had a scenario where we've put something in for if we don't get confirmation that the patient's gone through successfully, but what happens in the scenario of Compucare thinking the payment's gone through, but some reason it not going through in the bank, whether that's the merchant or the bank suddenly declining that payment later on if it's picked up by their fraud team for some reason. So that provisional transaction only exists for where Compucare isn't sure of if it's gone through or not. If Compucare thinks it has gone through because it's received a message that it's gone through, then it will actually just get posted like a normal receipt onto the patient account as unallocated cash. So in the event that for some reason that money doesn't hit the merchant bank account when you're doing your bank rec, or you find that it's been declined at some point later down the line and hasn't fully gone through, then what you would do is you would put an adjustment into the system to basically adjust that payment back off the patient's account, allocating the two together. So no, the provisional side hasn't been designed for that. It's just for when we haven't had successful confirmation. But if we have and then it later appears not, then you have to do a normal adjustment like you would have anyway. So, okay, looking at question 4, is there going to be an update so we'll be able to see who has added an initial consultant availability? So you can currently look at this. So again, if I just bring the screen back up for the system, and what we'll do is we'll just come out of the audit logs, we'll go into the clinician availability app, we will filter down availability for today maybe or something like that. So we've got John Anderson's availability that's being created there, and against that record what I'm able to do is go into the audit logs, and for that record it's showing that it was me that created that availability actually today, just a few minutes ago. So you get the fact that I've created it and the date and time and which machine name I'd done that from and things like that, and you get the details of what I set up when I originally created it. So for this one it was just a diary record for today, and it was running between 9 and 12 o'clock, and there's obviously other reservations like the room reservations and things like that that have gone into the audit log there. So yes, we are now auditing that, and that was part of the change that Mark took you through. And so looking at the last question on here, so tags, can they be used to issue a report from the report generator? No, they can't at the moment in terms of the columns that we distribute. That's probably something that we might want to close a little gap on. In terms of the SQL queries that we write, yes, these are held in the table and could be queried out. So if we did want to look at, how many bookings needed, had this particular COVID test required or embassy patient or something tagged against them, email cancellation, then we could write a query to do that. So we'll, as a result of this, we'll have a look at how we add that into report generator. So I'm just going to, that comes to the end of the questions on here. I'm just going to check the Q&A panel to make sure no others have snuck in. And I think looking at it, that's the end of those. So once again, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this afternoon and look through all the new enhancements that we've been busily working on. We're really excited for you to start rolling this out and onto your test systems and seeing how you could make use of some of these features. And as ever, we're always just a phone call away. So if you need to find out any more, just come back to us either on the marketing team or the support team, and the next webinar for Compucare will be in the autumn. Thank you very much.